That sounds good, Steve. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your patience, everybody, and thanks for being here this afternoon. My name's Steve Werblow with the Conservation Technology Information Center, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's webinar. We've got Sarah Lehman, the NARS team leader, giving us a talk on the history of NARS and providing some context into the work that's going on around the country. We'll have questions at a couple of points during the program. If you look down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the little Q&A button. So please feel free to type questions into that. If we can't answer your questions during the program, we will follow up with an answer afterwards. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, and we'll look forward to a great presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Just get this up and make sure that that is showing up on everybody's screen.
Yep, looks great.
Great. So thanks, Steve, for serving as our moderator. Thanks also to CTIC for hosting not only this webinar, but the upcoming National NARS meeting that'll be taking place in April. And I also want to thank the members of the advisory committee who have been working with CTIC now for a couple of years while we've been going through the COVID changes to bring about this workshop. And I want to thank all of you for attending, and I echo Steve's apologies for the little technical difficulties, but I think we'll still be able to get through this quite well. So I'm going to turn off, I wanted to say hi in person. I'm going to turn off my video just to make sure that I don't end up with sort of bandwidth issues, but I'll come back on during questions. So today I'll be covering information on the backdrop to NARS, the research program that underlies the survey, and the Clean Water Act Section 106 monitoring initiative grants that provide funding. I'm also planning to describe the current NARS program, which is information you're probably more used to hearing from me, but I think that some of the history and background may help put the current program into context, perhaps in a different way. And finally, I'll highlight some of the ways NARS might be useful to you, as well as recent advancements we've made. And a number of those items will also be discussed at the meeting in April, so sort of a coming previews. The Clean Water Act's objective is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. Monitoring is needed to determine whether we're moving in the right direction in achieving that objective. And as you all know, information is needed at multiple scales, from local to state and tribal, and to national, in order to most effectively manage our resources. The Clean Water Act gives primacy to states for most monitoring, but it does reflect a shared responsibility between EPA and states for some monitoring, assessment, and reporting to meet data needs. Two of these are specifically applicable to NARS. 104A5, which calls for EPA to work with others to implement a national surveillance program, and Section 305B, which calls for state reporting on your waters and a national water quality inventory submitted to Congress by EPA. Section 104A5 specifically calls for EPA to work with others to establish, equip, and maintain a water quality surveillance system to monitor the quality of our waters. I found the history of this interesting, so I wanted to share a little bit of it with you. I was also a history major, so that might be part of why. After passage of the Clean Water Act, EPA worked with partners to establish a network of stream sites as called for by Section 104, and it was called the National Water Quality Surveillance System. EPA reported out on this in the first report to Congress under Section 305B in 1975. Building on that initial network, EPA worked with partners to establish what was called the Basic Monitoring Program, and that included aspects relevant to state and local, as well as national water quality objectives. An ambient monitoring network of 1,000 stations was proposed as part of the overall Basic Monitoring Program. EPA intended to use this new network to measure progress towards achieving water quality goals at the national level by aggregating the data for use in determining national trends. Information was deemed necessary to support development of protection and restoration efforts, as well as to guide budget and grant strategies at the national level. Consistency across states and organizations was important for this aspect of water quality to meet those national needs. That original base program specifically noted that the state Section 305B reports would be summarized, and those summaries would be used along with the national ambient data analysis to describe water quality at a national level to Congress. Today, NARS is designed to address those same national and broad regional scale information needs in conjunction with state and tribal partners. EPA's Office of General Counsel confirmed that NARS is authorized by and helps to satisfy the direction of the 104A5 requirement. As I mentioned, NARS also informs and benefits the National Water Quality Inventory Report that EPA prepares for Congress. This section of the Clean Water Act calls for a summary of state reports and is designed to provide Congress with information on how well we are meeting the goals of the Clean Water Act. A relationship between sections 104 and 305 is consistent with the House and Senate committee reports from the passage of the 1972 Clean Water Act, which link the water quality surveillance network requirement to this 305B requirement for states and EPA to report on water quality on an ongoing basis. As I mentioned, whoops, excuse me. Sorry. Even given those statutory requirements, you may wonder why we need a national monitoring program, given all the monitoring activities that are implemented by states, tribes, and other organizations. Well, national policy questions can often seem simple, but without the right data, we can't answer them. We know that the US spends significant resources to address water quality issues, but when leaders such as former EPA Administrator Ruckelhaus and Riley were asked seemingly simple questions such as whether water quality was getting better or not, or how many acid lakes there actually were in the country, they had to acknowledge that they didn't have the data to answer the questions. They could not use data from state programs to answer these regional and national questions because of differences in how states implement their programs, such as varying water quality standards, indicators, and methods, as well as different reasons for selecting the sites that were assessed. Additional attention on monitoring also highlighted the need to reconsider a national monitoring program. A number of critiques were published during the 1990s and early 2000s that highlighted inadequacies in our collective monitoring programs to provide data in support of various needs of water managers from the local to national scale. One report by the General Accounting Office noted that most monitoring did not allow for statistically valid assessments and that state 305B reports couldn't be summarized to appropriately create a national picture of water quality. Examples of organizations finding gaps in our collective monitoring programs included GAO, EPA's Inspector General, the Heinz Center, the National Research Council, EPA's Report on the Environment, and others. Two other ways in which our monitoring and assessment issues were highlighted included FMFIA and a study by the Association of State and Interstate Water Pollution Control Administrators. Under the Federal Managers Financial Integrity Act, Section 305B reporting was identified as a weakness as a result of insufficient and inconsistent data and assessments for meeting all of our water resource management needs, or maybe not all, but our water resource management needs. EPA was able to close out this weakness in part through working with states to develop water quality monitoring strategies and initiation of national statistical surveys. Around the same time, SWPCA, now called AQUA, identified a monitoring program gap of roughly $100 to $150 million per year in state programs, which also helped to highlight the need to focus additional attention and resources on monitoring. To begin to address these critiques and monitoring gaps, EPA worked with partners to establish a monitoring program vision for the future. Two main objectives were that EPA, states, and tribes have adequate data to make sound decisions, and that we could characterize the health of the nation's waters. Some of the actions that were identified to move forward with this vision were: one, to develop and implement statistical surveys, which became known as NARS with the National Lakes Assessment in 2007, to improve state and tribal monitoring programs, including development of monitoring strategies, and three, to work to attain additional resources for states and tribes to support national surveys and enhance monitoring programs. In a moment, I'll provide some additional information on the monitoring initiative grants that are providing some resources to fill these gaps. But first, I want to touch briefly on another critical building block for NARS. Today's NARS program is based on a significant amount of scientific research by EPA's Office of Research and Development in collaboration with states, tribes, and other organizations. This work established the technical foundation for the program. In the late 1980s, a group of researchers began developing the outlines for a novel environmental monitoring program to address national questions. After a year of discussion, these scientists had an outline of what they thought needed to happen and began the process of building partnerships within EPA and with states, tribes, and other federal agencies. Major objectives of what came to be called the Environmental Monitoring and Assessment Program, or EMAP, included estimating the current status, trends, and changes of the condition of the nation's ecological resources with known confidence, estimating the geographic coverage and extent of the nation's ecological resources, and seeking associations among selected indicators of stress and indicators of ecological condition. Work that culminated in what is now NARS began with ORD's Aquatic Effects Research Program that took place in the late 1980s. EMAP itself began in 1988 and included a variety of projects, such as surface waters, estuaries, wetlands, and others. During this time period, ORD also implemented a regional grant program called REMAP that spurred a wide variety of research projects at regional and state scales and introduced partners to environmental statistical surveys. This wide variety of research provided significant understanding of design, methods, indicators, and assessment approaches across these water body types. Throughout this process, EMAP approaches and research were peer-reviewed through a number of processes, including multiple reviews by EPA's Science Advisory Board, publication of peer-reviewed journal articles, and other means. As ORD was implementing EMAP, the Office of Water, Office of Management and Budget, and others were recognizing the importance of statistical surveys in answering national and regional questions in a cost-effective way to address a portion of the identified monitoring gap. As a result, OW turned to ORD for assistance, and we began to work together as part of the monitoring vision to implement national statistical surveys. The first project conducted together in partnership with states was a statistical survey in the eastern part of the country to link up with work done by EMAP in the West. The combined assessment was the Weightable Streams Assessment. Over the next few years, logistical implementation was transitioning from EPA's research office to Office of Water. However, to this day, ORD plays a significant role in NARS, including technical support on design, indicators, analysis, data management, and a wide variety of other aspects. The work done by ORD and their collaborators over the past 20 years was vital in the successful launch of NARS. A steady source of funding, which I'll talk about next, came about through the monitoring initiative. But first, Steve, we can take a few questions if there are any.
Okay, if you've got questions, we do have that Q&A box that you can access by clicking down the bottom of your screen. I don't see any questions right now. Yeah, okay. And I don't want to get in the way of your upcoming slides by asking.
Sure, not to worry.
Oops, wait, we've got one here from Roger Stewart. It says, when was the first year of REMAP?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll have to verify with Steve Paulson and other folks out in Corvallis as to the first year of it. I want to say that it started in around 1990 to 1994, but I'm not positive.
Great. Thanks. And thanks, Roger. Are there any other questions before Sarah takes on the rest of her program? All right. Sarah, I'll give you back the mic and okay. We'll go on from there.
All right, so let's turn to the monitoring initiative. In response to the concerns and vulnerabilities identified about water quality monitoring, EPA and our partners worked to implement an initiative supporting enhancements to state and tribal monitoring programs and national assessments through statistical surveys. Working together, EPA and states identified an approach for allocating the funds between those two key goals. The allocation of funding was $10 million for enhancing monitoring programs by implementing priorities described in monitoring strategies, and $8.5 million for the National Aquatic Resource Surveys. Whoops. So just a little detail on the timeline for monitoring initiative funds. In 2005, the first funds were provided for state enhancements. And then in FY 2006, EPA's appropriation included the $18.5 million for statistical surveys and enhancements to monitoring programs. The funding for statistical surveys from 2006 were applied to the National Lakes Assessment 2007. In FY 2008, OMB expressed concern that all of the funds from the monitoring initiative weren't being used for statistical surveys. After a number of discussions, EPA and OMB agreed to maintain the split between the enhancements and statistical surveys if EPA included a requirement for state-scale statistical surveys and reporting. Funding has continued to be appropriated under Section 106 each year, although the exact amount of funding varies a bit based on the appropriation language and congressional rescissions. And just as an aside, if you'd like assistance with running population estimates for survey sites in your state or uploading the results in the to the Attains statistical survey model, please contact me or Garrett Stillings of our team. Just as NARS was built on a foundation of collaborative research, partnerships remain critical to the program today. Partners include states, tribes, territories, interstates, a variety of EPA offices, as well as academics and other federal agencies. There are a variety of processes used to engender collaboration, including individual steering committees that the leads for each of the surveys manage. Through these committees, partners discuss design, methods, indicators, and analysis, among other topics. The Monitoring and Assessment Partnership is an EPA state group that focuses on a variety of monitoring initiatives and issues, including NARS. And we also hold periodic survey-specific and national meetings and hold sessions at meetings hosted by other organizations. The rest of this part of the presentation will focus on statistical survey funding and not the monitoring enhancement portion of the monitoring initiative. For NARS, states and tribes receive $8,000 per site that falls in their jurisdiction to cover training, field, and lab work. EPA provides support by developing the Quality Assurance Project Plan, field methods, and lab methods to maintain consistency. We also host regional trainings for field crews, which include online as well as in-person field components. We provide site kits, which include supplies like bottles and shipping materials that are needed at each site for sampling. And we provide for shipping of samples to national labs. In some cases, EPA will also provide equipment for standardization purposes. These include such things as zooplankton nets, where the length and mesh sizes need to be the same, or sediment cores, and tablets that we use for electronic field forms. There are multiple ways that states, tribes, and territories can opt to participate in the surveys for the sites in their jurisdiction. You can opt to do all of the field work yourself, conduct field work for some of the sites, request support for specific expertise, or request that contractors conduct all of the work. Similarly, for lab work, you can opt to do all of the lab work, some of the lab work, or request contractor labs do all of that work. Note that our indicators tend to come as bundles, and for a variety of reasons, it's pretty hard for us to separate them out. For example, we can't price out and separate individual parameters from the water chemistry lab work. You can also opt to add sites to your total that include all of the NARS methods, or you could focus on specific state or tribal indicators of interest at those sites. When requesting contractor assistance, EPA will place the monitoring initiative funds on national contracts. Just reach out to your regional contacts to discuss options that may be of interest. Some examples of fieldwork twists that states have implemented include, for example, sampling only the weightable streams while requesting contractors sample non-weightable systems, or sampling only sites within 3 hours of the office was something that popped up as part of folks' response to COVID. Others have requested contractor assistance for specific expertise, such as a botanist or a crew to come and collect fish. Examples of different ways that others have implemented lab work include conducting water chemistry, but then sending all the other samples to the national lab, sending all the NARS samples to the national lab, but conducting additional state-specific samples that are processed in-house, or even conducting some lab work where the state opts to sample sites, but for sites where you're having contractors sample, requesting all of those samples to go to the national labs. There's lots of opportunity to find implementation approaches that will work for you. So here are a few examples of different ways to think about designs. States have implemented intensifications by adding additional sites to achieve state scale assessments, either by doing the work themselves or even by requesting contractor assistance. If a state is adding extra sites and collecting all of the NARS indicators, EPA can typically provide site kits and shipping support. You can conduct all of the work yourself or split those up with the contractor as well. It's important to note that good communication is needed between EPA, the state, and the contractor when more than one organization is sampling within a single jurisdiction. States also request special designs that might be focused on sampling a specific resource or area of the state more intensively, including waters that are outside of the NARS target population, or working together as a group implementing regional studies. All right, so I'll pause just a second again to see if there's any questions about the monitoring initiative.
Okay, I'm looking at the Q&A, so if you've got some questions to post, please do so. In the meantime, I'm going to read an answer from Elizabeth Smith, who responded to Roger Stewart's question about REMAP.
Great.
So Elizabeth said, Region 7 was doing REMAP in 1993-94, but that was built upon and preceded by Mid-Atlantic and Western Wadable Streams projects.
Thanks, Liz.
Are there any other questions in the meantime?
All right,
Sarah.
Excellent.
Yep, there's a thanks.
Oh, okay.
Everybody's so polite. Okay, Sarah, it's back to you.
Okay, thanks. Oops, there's the video again. All right, so I'm going to turn to describing NARS, which has its roots in the work done by ORD and their collaborators under EMAP, as well as the recognized need for data to support national assessments. As I mentioned, NARS is a partnership between EPA, states, and tribes designed to monitor and assess the condition of surface waters in the US, and it includes lakes, rivers and streams, coastal waters, and wetlands. NARS is specifically designed to assess not individual waters in detail, but to provide information across the population of these waters. As a program, we have three overarching objectives. First, to assess the biological and recreational condition of the nation's waters, as well as to track changes over time. As we're progressing into the third and fourth iterations of the surveys, we're increasingly able to look at trends. Second, the program is designed to rank stressors in terms of their impact on condition. And third, the program aims to enhance state and tribal monitoring and assessment capacity. A significant component of NARS is achieving and maintaining national consistency in the assessments for each of the water body types. To address this, NARS employs a statistical survey design as was originally envisioned as part of EMAP. In this design, sites are selected randomly across the country, allowing extrapolation of the results beyond the sites sampled to the entire population of waters. For example, for the most recent Rivers and Streams report, partners sampled roughly 2,000 sites over 2 summers, but results represent 1.2 million miles of rivers and streams. Our implementation strategy has us rotate between the water body types each year. To date, we've undertaken 12 surveys, starting with lakes in 2007, through our most recent adventure, which was implementing the wetland survey last summer. Crews from across the country will be monitoring lakes this coming summer. For NARS, all field crews across the country use the same methods to collect data. Standardized lab protocols are also used. The program employs a national quality assurance and data management program to support consistency in the data sets as well. And finally, we develop national and regional scale assessments. An important part of NARS is co-located information. For each survey, we include a number of chemical, physical, and biological indicators. These indicators are collected at all of the sites, allowing researchers to conduct a variety of analyses looking at relationships and associations between them. Some of the indicators we include are noted here. For example, we collect data on benthic macroinvertebrates in rivers and streams, coastal waters and lakes, as well as vegetation and wetlands. And we analyze water for nutrients in all 4 surveys. Core indicators are repeated over time to support not only condition, but change and trend analyses. And we also include various research indicators from time to time. For example, research by EPA scientists on water isotopes or eDNA projects. The next 3 slides present some general results from NARS at the national scale. Here we see a comparison of biological condition across the water body types. In estuarine systems, 71% of the area is in good condition based on benthic macroinvertebrates, but less than half of our other waters are in good condition. NARS results indicate that nutrients and degraded habitat are problems across the country. Excess levels of phosphorus, for example, are found in 58% of flowing waters, 40% of lakes, and approximately 20% of coastal waters. Habitat degradation is also widespread, with around a quarter of wetland area, lakes, and river and stream miles in poor condition. One of the NARS objectives is also to look at the relationship between stressors and condition. NARS has found that poor biological condition is nearly twice as high in wetlands when vegetation removal or soil compaction are extensive. Poor biological condition is 1.5 to 2 times more likely in lakes and rivers and streams when poor habitat or nutrients are high. In addition to the national assessments, the NARS are used in other ways, which I'm going to touch on now, including by states and other researchers. So states have leveraged NARS for a variety of purposes, some of which are listed here. For example, a number of states have conducted state-scale statistical surveys, such as Oklahoma, Minnesota, and South Carolina, to report on the condition of their waters. Other organizations have also intensified the number of sites in their area of interest, such as estuary programs and an upcoming Upper Midwest Forest Service project for lakes. States have also used NARS information or methods to address programmatic issues of interest, such as water quality criteria development, highlighting the importance of lakeshore restoration, or developing stressor thresholds. Others have also leveraged NARS to add additional indicator work or to develop and enhance their own monitoring programs. NARS data have been used by a variety of scientists to look into questions and uncover environmental patterns and relationships. A few of those are highlighted here, and you can find other examples on the NARS Journal Articles webpage. Hill et al. Used data to predict streams that could be good candidates for protection and restoration, while Stoddard et al. Used NERSA and NLA data to document a continental scale increase in lake and stream phosphorus concentrations that was also seen by several states when they looked into their own data sets. Using data from NLA, Leach et al. Identified an increase in murky lakes related to nutrient pollution across the country. We're looking to have another pre-conference webinar to highlight some of the research indicators that have been included in NARS. I also wanted to highlight a few other ways that NARS might be of use. These include providing data on new and emerging issues, such as PFAS that OST is working on in fish, having the ability to place information from your waters in context with those of other states, regions, and the nation, learning new methods or approaches, accessing reference site information from across jurisdictional boundaries, and even monitoring some waters you might not otherwise include in your program. The taxa lists and related autocology that NARS has for species across the country could be useful in development of new or refined biological indicators. We've heard that NARS training and laboratory QC approaches provide the opportunity for individuals to interact with and learn from other personnel in their region and across the country. And for those interested, there can be opportunities to serve as expert trainers. So the final items that I want to touch on briefly are some additional tools and advancements that we've been making recently, primarily based on feedback you've been giving us through national meetings and other venues. I won't try to describe all of the items in detail, but we'll just mention a few, and you can see links and contacts if you're interested in following up. In addition, as I mentioned, we're planning to have talks about some of these tools at the NARS meeting. Karen Bloxham from EPA developed an R-Shiny tool to make running population estimates using the SP survey code easier. Karen has also developed a tool that allows field crews to extract data from the NARS field apps for their own use, as well as to develop a report of field data that can be provided to landowners. Garrett Stillings has developed a tool to support users in developing their own statistical survey designs. And in addition to the dashboards that you can access online, we are also developing an R-Shiny version, currently for lakes, that can be adapted for use with state statistical survey data. We're hoping to have Wisconsin and Oregon describe their experiences with the design tool and the adaptable dashboard at the meeting in April. We've been developing new forms of communicating information about the surveys, including the NERSA Field Methods application that explains how we collect data in a public-friendly manner, and new training videos to support crews. We've made significant strides in making data available to partners and the public more quickly, as evidenced by providing data from the recent NERSA and NCCA surveys within 1 year to our partners. We've also made data from all of the NARS through NERSA 2018-2019 available to the public, and expect to have some data from NCCA 2020 available very soon. Finally, we're also hosting a data analysis challenge for graduate students and other researchers to encourage them to use NARS data to examine high priority issues such as nutrients, climate change, and the water equity gap. And with that, I am happy to take any questions.
All right, again, we've got, we've got a couple of questions. First one came from Tim Asplund. And the question is, what is a rough number of states that are regularly participating in NARS versus opting out, for instance, letting the EPA contract it out?
Yeah, so thanks, Tim. That's a great question. And it does vary a little bit from survey to survey. I would say on average, we're probably in the 35 to 38 range. Coastal is a little less, obviously, because not all of the interior states participate in coastal. But I would say we're at that sort of 35 to 38 range.
Great. Also, I'm going to read Elizabeth Smith's question in a sec, but I also encourage folks to type into that Q&A, and we'll keep the questions coming. So here is Elizabeth Smith's. Staff often ask why NARS reference sites are sampled by EPA staff while states sample the probabilistic sites. Will you explain this in the 106S discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Liz, and thanks for bringing it up. So the way that our appropriations funding works, once we've sort of decided how we're going to utilize funds that are grant funds, as well as sort of contracting dollars, it's the bulk of the rest of the money that we have in EPA, we're supposed to stick to that allocation. And that was the way that we started early on. So right now, we're not able to augment state grants to do work outside of the monitoring initiative formula. And because we've been utilizing EPA's contractor funds to do the reference site work, that has stayed separate between the states and EPA. We sort of have to account for them separately. We're able to have the regions participate and not just contractors, because they can take and go out and do that work. If we were to have a state go out, we'd be, in a sense, either asking them to do work that we couldn't provide for under their grant, or augmenting their grant with funds that aren't supposed to go there. So hopefully that answers your question, Liz.
Right. I'll watch to see if there's any further feedback on that one. In the meantime, we have one from either S. Hubler or Schubler. It says, thanks, Sarah. Can you touch on plans to get NARS data into STORE-T/WQX?
Yeah, hey, Shannon. So we have been working really hard the past 2 years on doing that. We have a couple of data sets that have recently been made live in WQX. Some of the rivers and streams data, and we are just about to go live with several other data sets. So we should have 5 or 6 data sets from lakes, rivers and streams, and coastal waters all up in WQX. That does not include the physical habitat data yet, although I'm really excited to hear that Oklahoma may be on the verge of helping us be able to do that. And it doesn't include wetlands data yet. We know that there's some special things that we need to sort of do and set up still to get some of the wetlands data into WQX. But we are really excited about the progress we've been making, and we'll be able to give you some more updates on that in April.
Outstanding. Okay, here's one from Kelly Merrill. It says, it's been 17 years since OMB requested and Congress appropriated funds for improving monitoring under Clean Water Act Section 106. Do you see a similar analysis of whether both state and EPA monitoring needs are being adequately funded And is there any way the results from NARS can be used to advocate for more funding to monitoring?
Great question. I think that the data both from states and EPA can be used in making the case for the need for additional resources for monitoring. I think there are always opportunities that we are looking for within EPA to highlight those needs, and will continue to do so. Certainly hope that state organizations, tribal organizations, and others are also doing that. Obviously, EPA and EPA staff can't lobby Congress directly, so we do have to sort of work through the management processes, but we are always looking for those opportunities and collecting information that we get from you all on information about what the gaps are, where the issues are in terms of funding needs, and all of those pieces of information to include in our requests.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, I'll be watching for other questions. In the meantime, one thing I wanted to ask while people go to the phones, as they say, is you mentioned the data analysis challenge, Sarah. How would somebody help their contacts, grad students, scientists get involved in that challenge?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I realized that I was going through that last slide, I didn't even put the link to our NARS challenge page on the slide. So if you search for EPA innovation challenges, the NARS one will come up as an active challenge. It includes information about the 4 categories in which we are asking for projects. And so those are nutrients, climate change, equity, and then enhancing monitoring and assessment programs in general. And the idea is for those who participate to provide us with a intent to participate by spring or early summer, so that we sort of know how many people are going to be participating, and to use at least one of the NARS data sets in their project. So again, sort of expanding the number of people who know about these data sets and start to use them. We did do a webinar to reach out to folks, and that has been recorded. And if it's not up on our website yet, it will be very soon, so that folks can go back and refer to that, or get a chance to view it for the first time. I don't know if there are any of the NARS folks on the participants list right now, but if anybody is, and you can grab the link and just toss it into the chat, that would be great.
Outstanding. We'll watch for that in the chat. Also in the chat, Callie Cleveland from CTIC points out, make sure to watch your inboxes and the CTIC website, which is ctic.org, for upcoming information on the NARS National Conference webinar, which is going to be April 5th through 7th from 1 to 5 o'clock. We've got a slide on that. But yeah, in the meantime, too, we mentioned webinars, and we've got a webinar coming up in March, date to be determined, but we'll be talking about new research indicators. And I think it's really exciting to consider just how those early questions have been, not only you've been starting to address the answers to those questions with this massive data set, but also are exploring deeper questions and more levels of detail, which is really exciting. So I'm going to ask if there's any other questions. We've got Amy Newbold put a link in the chat to the innovation challenge. So thank you for doing that, Amy. And then Callie did put also in the chat a link to keeping updated on the March webinar and the April meeting. We're going to post a slide right now that has the dates for the April meeting. And I hope we get to see you all there, and we'll look forward to a great program. In addition, again, I just want to thank you on behalf of everybody at CTIC for your patience this afternoon in terms of helping us or letting us sort out some of the Zoom issues. Here comes that slide that I was promising. So April 5th, 6th, and 7th from 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern. There are contacts at the bottom of that slide. And again, the link in the chat to help stay in touch, both in terms of the timing, but also in terms of the content. There's a lot of great material that's going to be coming together for the webinars and for the National Conference. Is there anything I've forgotten to say? Sarah, do we have anything else that we want to make sure we share?
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much, Steve, again, for moderating. Thank you, everybody, for attending. If you do have questions, you can always reach out to CTIC or to me. I'm happy to get back with you.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.